Hey, it's Rachel. I've been promising to do a tour of my chicken coop and run forever. I'm getting it done today, despite the fact that it's very hot. I'm going to break this into 6 chapters, each one dedicated to a topic you have to factor in as you're designing your own system. Those 6 topics are sufficient living space, predator protection, protecting the chickens from extremes of cold and high heat, like today, adequate ventilation, sanitation, and providing food and water. Kicking off with the topic of sufficient living space. There are a total of 5 birds supported by the system and protected by it. I decided to go with buff Orpingtons because of their general friendly natures, quiet characteristics, and good egg laying. I am only raising eggs. I am not interested in meat. Hi ladies. My garden is surrounded by a deer moat that consists of 2 4-foot tall fences that are 5 feet apart. We built the chicken coop and the run into the northeast corner of that moat and converted it for this purpose. The end result was that I have an L-shaped run for the chickens. The north side of that is 26 feet long and 5 feet wide. The east leg of that is 10 feet long and 5 feet wide. And then the coop is all the way at the south end of that L, and it is roughly 5 feet by 6 feet in dimension. Because I'm supporting 5 chickens out of this system, that means each of them has 6 square feet of space in the coop and 36 square feet of space in the run. That's significantly higher than the recommended minimums. In addition to sufficient just square footage, you want to think about roost space and nesting boxes. We have one roost that spans the interior of the coop that puts it at about 5 feet long, or roughly 1 foot per bird. The usual guideline is 8 to 10 inches, and so I felt that 12 would work pretty well. It has turned out that it has worked nicely. All 5 of my hens roost up there just fine. I did not want to have roosts at different heights because that can result in the chickens getting into little fights over who gets to sit on the taller roost. I wanted kind of an egalitarian one big roost situation, and so far it's working quite well. The guideline for nesting boxes is usually 1 box for every 3 to 4 hens. Because I have 5 hens, I put 2 nesting boxes into the design. Give you the quick basics on the coop construction because most of this was done with leftover materials. When we originally built the garden, my main entrance was flanked by 2 compost bins. We kept the one on the south, but ultimately we removed the one on the north and replaced it with the coop instead, and I'll show you how that worked out. You can see here the existing raised beds and what used to be the front of my compost bin. We removed the back of it, we left the front of it, the south piece in place, and then we built the coop on top of it. We had the 2 lower wooden fences in place. We added ledger boards to those and then dropped an existing pallet that we had saved from our construction of our house. We used to hold construction materials. Dropped that across to span the 2 ledger boards and then screwed some plywood on top of that. We built up the exterior walls from leftover 2x6 pressure treated tongue and groove, left over from the rest of the fence build. Spanned that with some 2x2 lumber to make roof joists, covered that with plywood, and then covered that with metal roofing. One note on standing seam metal, the edges are very, very sharp when you cut it. We weren't really worried about this edge because it's just hanging in the middle of space, but we were worried about this edge. That's why we have this insulation cut and wrapped around it. This is just so nobody accidentally brushes against this and gets a nasty cut to the side of their head. I found a remnant of vinyl flooring at our local big box store and cut that to fit the inside to protect the wooden floor from moisture. The ultimate design ended with a door for egg access on the east side of the coop. That's the side that faces the house. That makes it easy for daily access for collecting eggs. The south wall has a large door on it to clean out the bedding a couple of times a year. I chose that wall because it is immediately adjacent to the existing compost bed that we kept in place, and I can clean out the bedding and put it straight into the compost. The west wall is solid with just ventilation along the top. We cut this roof off to land at the halfway point of this bed. This is my mushroom bed. We wanted to keep this moist to get some nice flushes of mushrooms. Did a separate video on my wine cap mushroom bed, but the chicken coop roof does double duty of protecting the chickens and also concentrating water and getting it into this mushroom bed. If you turn and look at the coop from the north side, that's where the automatic chicken coop door is that allows them in and out to go into the run that's attached. Because of how we built the coop spanning from wall to wall, there's a nice shady, dry area underneath the coop that's tall enough for the chickens to go in and out. That's where I keep their dust bath as well as their oyster shells for the grid. I'm going to enter and walk around, show you guys the run from the inside. To walk past my shed and down to this end, what was originally going to be a full planting bed. Hi, puppies. Pulled that back for access and made this very makeshift gate that does in fact work surprisingly well. Built a solid fence at the bottom to match the adjacent exterior fence of my garden. That continues on over there. It's a solid piece to match that. For the top, I really just wanted to keep the chickens in. To do that, I have a roll of chicken wire. This little nail keeps it in place at the top, and the post keeps it in place at the bottom. And I can simply roll that up, move it aside, and climb in and out at my leisure. I can get in, the dogs cannot. You guys cannot come play with the chickens, sorry. To close it, I just unroll it and put it back. Let's talk predator proofing. In order to really predator proof your coop, you need to have no openings 1/2 inch or larger. I accomplished this 2 ways. First, with my exterior walls, is pressure treated 2x6 tongue and groove. See that in profile here at the outside edge. These interlocking tongues and grooves meant that I didn't have any gaps and I did not have any worry about predators worming their way through these walls. They are literally interlocked and then screwed into place solidly from a 2x6 into a 4x4. Second was using this leftover stucco mesh that we had from our build for the house. The openings on that are significantly smaller than 1/2 inch. I created effectively a lid inside of the coop that spanned from one wall all the way across the ceiling and down to the other, overlapping the sheets. And I zip tied the sheets together to really make it one continuous lid. This keeps any predators from getting in through the ventilation area that I put at the top of the coop. The floor has that continuous sheet of plywood screwed to it, so nothing is getting in through there. Because we do have an automatic coop door that closes automatically at night, that's one less thing for me to worry about or forget to do, and the chickens are locked in safe and snug every evening. The last couple of things to note on predator proofing have to do with our latches and door designs. All of our latches on the coop are a simple latch that then has a carabiner clipped through it. If you want access, remove the carabiner, open the latch, and then lift this up. Same detail with the latch and the carabiner. Remove the carabiner, open the latch. Did this to outsmart raccoons. This 2-step process is fairly easy for a human being, but pretty complicated for a raccoon. In addition to that, we have the door design. Let me show you how this worked out on our clean out door. We built a frame inside this door that sticks in so that when you close it, you have a piece of wood that's recessed in. So if a predator tried to come in around the outside of this door, they would encounter that vertical shield inside. And we ran that around the top as well as both sides and the bottom to really ensure that this was a predator-proof secure door. I really did want to keep the coop secure. But when it comes to the run, all I really worried about was overhead protection from aerial predators like hawks that might come in and try and get the chickens. That's why you see all of these cattle panel arches. In theory, if a hawk tried hard enough, it could come down and get through these openings, but effectively, it would stop a dive bombing attack from above of anything trying to come and get the chickens. Let's talk about temperature protection. I do live in Michigan, and everybody asks me all the time how the chickens are going to handle the winters, but to be honest, the summers are a bigger concern. In the winter, worst case, I could put a heater in the coop, the chickens can huddle together. As long as I can keep them dry, they're going to be okay. The real worry for me is high heat. Today's feels like temperature is 105 Fahrenheit, and that is hot. That is no joke hot. And I can see that the chickens are panting. I have provided effective shade, although not aesthetically pleasing, here on the eastern, shorter leg of the run. I've covered this for now with a silage tarp, white on one side, black on the other, white to reflect the heat. It gives quite a bit of shade underneath, as you can see, and it creates a nice little microclimate for the chickens. There's no direct sun on it because it is the north face, and it has this overhead cover that allows for a slightly cooler area of air to run into the coop. And then they've got this really nice shady area underneath the coop where they have cool exposed soil that they can sit on to stay much, much cooler than they would otherwise. I went under and I raked back the leaves under here for just one section to create a nice damp area where they can sit in the hot weather. In the spring, fall, and winter, I'm much more focused on having a nice fluffy layer of insulating leaves that will keep them dry and stop them from getting frostbite. But it's been so hot lately that I wanted them to have direct access to the earth. So I did rake that back and give them just a little soil area here where they can hang out and get through this heat wave. The risk of a black metal roof was turning the whole chicken coop into an oven. And so we designed the roof to prevent that from happening. I've got the tile mesh, I've got some wood framing above that. I put rigid foam insulation sheets underneath the plywood and then the metal roofing, and I did not close off these holes. That means that when sunshine comes down and bakes this roof, because the whole roof is at a slope, the chimney effect naturally pulls air in under these ridges and then pulls it up and out the other side. So that creates kind of a continuous flow of air ventilating underneath the metal itself and above the plywood. Below the plywood, you've got the insulation to help deflect the heat up, and you have the ventilation running on the chicken coop itself. For all of those reasons, this roof is well insulated and it does not transmit a ton of heat into the coop interior. I already talked about these cattle panels being used for security and safety from aerial predators, but they can also be used to provide shade. The shed gives me a nice block of shade along the west edge of this northern run, and I really just had to think about what I wanted to put then on this feast. You can see I have 1, 2, 3 rose bushes currently planted in this run. They have a long time to go until they reach full size, but when they do, they will hit about 20 feet in total vine length, and they should come up and cover the majority of this arch from the north or left side here. This stucco mesh that's left over, again, I'm using to keep the chickens away from the roses so they won't tear up the roots and generally just destroy the plants. Now on the south side of this trellis, it's hard to see because it's still a baby, but this is going to be a hardy kiwi vine eventually. And when it grows up, it will come over from the south side of the trellis and come up and also give shade from the south side. Now this year, the trellis really is pretty naked because these perennials haven't taken off yet. So I've also planted a pumpkin, a Lady Godiva pumpkin here and in that back corner. Those will grow up, hopefully cover quite a bit of this and give me some shade pretty soon. It'll also give me a crop of seeds for myself and some pumpkin meat for the chickens. And then I have a tomato here, and this is risky, I'll be honest. So I have a couple of tomato plants. It's risky because the leaves and the vines of tomatoes can be toxic to chickens, so I don't want the chickens getting this. The reason it's not on the trellis yet is I'm planning on letting these grow to much larger length, pruning off the lower foliage once they're long enough, and then I'll put them up onto this trellis once they're tall enough to really be out of the reach of the chickens. I don't want the tomatoes being readily accessible by the chickens because I'm afraid that they might eat them. They're not the smartest creatures. Ventilation. Why is this so important? It is not only for heat management in the summer, although it is critically important for that. It is also important to have ventilation in the winter because the main goal of ventilation is managing moisture. Chickens can handle cold weather pretty well as long as it's not a wet, cold air. If you end up with wet conditions in the coop, you can have frostbite in the winter on the chickens' combs and on their feet. You can also have respiratory issues just in general. They're very prone to that. And so you want to have probably way more ventilation in the coop than you think makes sense. You don't want to have drafts, meaning when the chickens are up on their roost, you don't want them to have cold air running right over them in the winter. In the summer, a draft might be nice, but in the winter, drafts are a no-no. But you do still want ventilation. And for that reason, I designed the coop with a continuous band of ventilation all around the top where the walls and the ceiling meet. This allows for airflow to go through in the winter, and the chickens are roosted well below that point. So it'll pass over their heads instead of hitting them directly. Now in the summer, my clean out door doubles as ventilation. Let me show you the details of how we built that door. This wood is leftover tongue and groove flooring material. My husband cut off the tongue on one side to make it flat, but we left the groove. They face the inside and then the bottom one faces up. In the winter, when I don't want as much ventilation going through this door, I can slide a piece of solid material into here and close this off. I could also, as an example, put partial pieces in and close it off just a little bit. So it gives me a lot of flexibility on the amount of air coming through. When it comes to sanitation, what you're really trying to avoid is a buildup of the chickens' waste material in their coop and in their run. If you start smelling ammonia, you have a problem. I did intentionally place the roost towards the south end of the coop, close to the access door. The majority of their manure will concentrate under their roosts. By putting the roost towards the south end, I made it immediately adjacent to this clean out door, and that means I can really stay on top of turning over that bedding whenever it needs it. I'll come in here with a full-size pitchfork or this little hand tool and fluff up these leaves, turn them over, kind of mix things around. Aerate it and make sure that the droppings have worked their way down to the bottom. And then I'll just kind of stir that around. You'll have to take my word for it. There's no smell-o-vision on this video, but the coop is completely odor-free. There's no hint of ammonia of any kind. And as those droppings and the leaves mix together, eventually that plus the moisture that's inherent to the droppings will result in this turning into some compost. The layer of leftover scrap linoleum that's covering the wood base of the floor is not secured in place. So a couple times a year when I want to do a really big clean out of the coop, I can scrape out and remove all of the bedding. I can pull out that liner completely and scrub it down and also disinfect the inside of the coop if I feel like it. The whole thing is designed for pretty easy maintenance and cleaning. For waste management in the run, I've laid down a ton of old dried leaves that we saved last fall and kept in the shed over winter to stay dry. We've been throwing in grass clippings as we mow the lawn. I throw weeds in here when I weed the garden. I'll throw kitchen scraps in. As you can see, I was canning a bunch of beets last night, so I have leftover beetroot trimmings there that I dumped out for the chickens, and that gives them something to scratch and peck and eat. In general, this run has become one big composting system. As a result, the chickens dig around in it for bugs and the scraps that we throw into it. Their manure just gets absorbed into all of the carbon coming from these dried leaves and becomes part of the compost process. And it never has a chance to build up or create issues or any kind of ammonia smell. Last topic, food and water. This is an area where I highly recommend having redundant systems in case one of them fails. I'll show a schematic of what I have immediately adjacent to the coop. There is a trash can based gravity feeder. I can link to the video tutorial that I used to build this thing, but basically it's a garbage can that has had holes drilled in the outside, and these are 90-degree elbows, PVC elbows, that go in and then arc down. So it's like that. And the chickens can stick their heads in and get to the food. Gives them 3 feeders for 5 chickens, which seems to work out pretty well. I don't see much arguing going on over here. And you simply pour the food in from the top. It'll hold an entire bag of feed. That gravity feeds down as they eat things out. It automatically fills itself back up. I didn't want the chickens only being fed commercial feed. They have access to it, free choice, in that garbage can feeder at all times. But they honestly prefer to forage. They like scratching. I think it's psychologically beneficial for them. And so I use this run as a redundant feeding system. I mentioned before, we treat this as a large composting area for reasons of sanitation, but it also ends up being supplemental feed for the chickens. The scraps that I throw in here from the garden and from the kitchen, they consume most of those very readily. And in the process of turning those and getting everything worked up, they often discover bugs that have been working their way through the compost, and that becomes an important source of protein for the chickens. I also have a stump that I keep in here, and I will occasionally flip that over to expose new ground. That results in insects being exposed and worms, and the chickens will go to town and scrap all of those up. The last redundant food system I should mention is my chicken salad bar. On the south edge here of the run, I planted a little chicken salad bar. This detail drove me crazy when we first had this garden built. They built this raised bed on the inside of these 4x4s, but then for some reason they put the fence and the trim on the outside of the 4x4s, and I didn't catch it until it was too late. That resulted in this weird little dead strip, 3.5 inches deep, that has just been the bane of my existence as far as weeds and issues ever since we moved in. But I figured out how to make it a positive in the run. So I put down some black tarp long enough to kill everything, and then I quickly seeded a chicken forage blend into this area. It's protected by this 2x6, so the chickens can't get into the roots of it. But from above, they can reach in and grab a fresh salad green all day long. I've also done an automatic refilling watering system immediately adjacent to the coop. I designed this to be easy to access from outside. I can reach this pitcher easily from outside and just reach around and fill this, but I'll fill it from the inside since I'm in here. The water goes down, fill that. This then feeds out on the bottom, and as the chickens drink water and it empties, those will refill. I did 5 chicken cups for 5 chickens. Again, this seems to work pretty well. They're drinking on a regular basis. We've had very, very high heat lately, and they have been panting, but they have been okay. Eventually, I would like to build a larger water reservoir onto the top of that water system. That's a project for another day. As of right now, this is working well for me and for the chickens. For water in particular, especially this time of year, I want a backup. And I keep a waterer inside their coop up on a couple of wooden blocks That way, if the outside waterer runs out of water, I've got a backup system and vice versa. I hope that was helpful. I am burning up out here. I'm gonna go back inside the house. I know I was going kind of quickly, so if there's anything that I didn't talk about, any questions you have that I didn't address, please put them in the comments below and I will do my best to respond. If there's something major that comes up repeatedly, I can always do a follow-up video on specific subtopics. Otherwise, until next time, I hope everybody is making it through this heat dome incident, that your gardens are okay, and that all of your chickens are well cared for and riding out this heat wave in safety. Until next time, thanks. Added benefit, dog entertainment. Hi, buddy.